Welcome to episode 5 of the Composer Happy Hour, presented by Whatever and Ever Amen. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to give you a quick reminder that this podcast is also available in video format, and this is probably a more personal way to be a part of the conversation. If you want to watch the episode, please visit us at buymeacoffee.com/whateverchoir. That's buymeacoffee.com/whateverchoir. In addition to all the podcast episodes, you can catch some of our other media there. And if you feel so inclined, you can buy us a beer and help support future projects by Whatever and Ever Amen. Our guest today is Eric Malmquist. He's a composer from Chicago, and lately he's been writing a lot of music for period instruments. If you have found your way to this podcast and you aren't a musician by training, this basically means he uses instruments that are built the way they were built hundreds of years ago. Instruments have changed a lot over the years, and by using these older style instruments, you're able to evoke certain sounds, moods, and create a different sort of soundscape than you might using modern instruments. In fact, Eric considers himself to be more of a composer for instrumental music, or perhaps some solo vocal music with instrumental accompaniment. But no matter what he says, do not let him tell you that he isn't a choral composer. Eric has written some stunning music for choirs, and he creates an aesthetic that I really like. He's also a really good guy, and so I was thrilled to invite him to be a part of the show. No fancy cocktails on this episode, just some delicious craft beer. So if you don't have a drink yet, hit pause and go grab a cold one. We are drinking hazy IPAs, but grab your beer of choice, sit back, relax, and join us for the conversation. My name is Brad Pearson. My guest today is Eric Malmquist, and this is the Composer Happy Hour. Eric, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. I'm so happy to have you here. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to get right into the most important stuff here. Tell us what you're drinking tonight.
I am drinking a Le Jus. This is a New England style IPA from Alarmist Brewing here in Chicago.
Nice.
It was the 2018 gold medal winner for the Juicy Hazy IPA division at Great American Beer Festival. Yeah, GAMP.
Awesome.
GAP. And I happen to know the owner because his wife and my wife used to work together at the local TV and radio station, and so we've been over there like before they opened and had a little get together, and I've been a big fan of their beer for a long time now.
Nice. Well, this is the first episode that I'm not drinking like a dark beer. I've been doing like big ABV stouts, barley wines. I'm also drinking a hazy IPA.
Hey.
But this is this is Homeboy from the Brewing Project in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I thought maybe I had a Chicago beer in the house, but I couldn't find anything. So, but yeah, so also an IPA, also hazy, about 6.5%, and I haven't had it yet, but I'm pretty excited.
That's awesome. Wisconsin beer is excellent, and that's close enough for me.
Yeah, there you go. For our audio only people, this is the weird awkward silence where we pour drinks.
I'll try and get it close to the mic so we get some frothy ASMR going on here.
There you go. Well, cheers. Both of us got I got a little extra head on mine. I think I was excited about the on-air pour.
Well, we don't often, yeah, exactly. We don't often have to have a video audience while we're pouring our beer. So
yeah, right. Now, so are you a beer guy in general? If you're reaching for a drink on a daily basis, is beer the kind of go-to?
Yeah, I had a cocktail phase a number of years ago, and then I kind of decided, you know what, it's a lot of, generally speaking, it can be like a lot of sugar. It's not like this doesn't have like lots of carbs in it,
yeah, right.
But it's like a lot of sugar and it's like a lot of effort, and then it tastes really good, so I have way too much of it. So
yeah,
beer is a cheaper, safer choice for me.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I like to say that I am discerning but not discriminating. Right? So if it's good, I'm happy about it. pretty much either way. But,
I have at one point I was talking to an acquaintance many years ago about beer. And he asked, "Oh, are you a beer connoisseur?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know if I would say that." And he said, "Oh, a glutton." So I said, "Yes, that's
sure.
me."
So I, in the last episode, had a guest, Dale Trumbore, and I talked to her.
Oh,
She
really?
lives in
Cool.
Yeah, she's great. I talked to her. She lives in California, and I said, basically, tell me why California is the best place to live, and she did. But I suspect that you living in Chicago have different thoughts on that. So tell us why you love Chicago.
Oh gosh. So I think it's winter weather excluded. I think it's like the best combination of traits that I really like about a city and a place to live. So it's a big city, but it's not too dense. It's not like it's like New York or San Francisco or something like that. You get a little bit more room to live. There's trees everywhere. Every street is lined with trees. So it's not like a concrete jungle. Like it feels like a number of years ago, I did a visit to New York to hear some pieces get done. And coming back, it felt like I lived in a forest preserve. And I love that. Like we get so much nature. We get coyotes and foxes and skunks running around in our streets, but it's still like this really big city. And of course, it's like an important cultural and business and technological and a great beer city and food city. It's got everything here. And it's got this great history. I don't know. It's just, it has everything. It's not as expensive. It's not as dense to be, like really like feeling like we're shut in, but at the same time, like everything is walkable. There's public trans. Is very diverse. I live in the most diverse neighborhood in Rogers Park. So the grocery store down the street has like a ton of like Balkan wines. If you want a really rare like Bulgarian wine, you just head a block down that way and pick out what you want. It's just it's difficult to like, I don't know. It's just except for the weather, for the winter weather, it's basically perfect in every way.
Well, I asked you, that was kind of a big question, right? Because I know that the reasons go on and on. Are you from Chicago or Chicago area originally?
Sort of. I'm from a small town to the south and west of Chicago called Morris. It's not a suburb. I'm about an hour and a half out of the way.
Have we talked about that before? Did I know that you were from Morris?
I think we might have. Yeah, I tend to bring it up a lot.
I can't remember, but my cousin and his wife live in Morris. He's I'm an insurance guy there, but he also coaches at the high school, and they've been there. I don't know, maybe I'm going to say a decade. I don't know if that's true or not. But my family is all from Princeton, Illinois, which is not far from Morris, west of Morris. Yeah, so I imagine there are a lot of people listening that don't have any idea where Morris, Illinois is, but it's that's cool.
I often bring it up, and I feel like why I said like I feel like I might have talked about it before is because I like to bring it up if I'm doing like a concert thing or a talk or something like that, because you never know when somebody in the back is going to be like, my uncle so and so lives in Morris or whatever the case may be. It's just nice to make those little connections that you never know. People all over the place have heard of Morris and have visited Morris and have eaten at the truck stop or whatever the case may be.
For sure.
Which has had a really nice restaurant at one point in time.
Yeah. And you mentioned Rogers Park, which puts you, a lot of neighborhoods are close to the lake, but you're close to the lake where you are. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah.
And anything else you could tell me about Rogers Park? I mean, why do you love, give us a postcard for your neighborhood or a plug for your neighborhood.
Yeah. So besides the fact that it has this great diversity where there's people coming from all over the world, like where the seat of the Assyrian Church of the East is up on Tui, and these are Assyrian folks who are refugees, typically Christian refugees from places like Iraq and Syria, have come to settle here over the last century. It's not just the last number of years. It's been people from the Middle East have been moving here for 100 years. We have a Bhutanese immigrant community. It's just great to have that kind of, and when I say community, I think that is also a really important part too, because it's, I feel like people in Rogers Park really care about their neighbors and the people that are around, walking around them every day in a way that you don't necessarily get. There's lots of very wealthy parts of the city where you can maybe get a really nice condo and there's great restaurants. You don't really get that feeling of really belonging to a community of neighbors that, say good morning and smile at each other as they walk by, no matter who you are, kind of a feel.
Yeah.
And it also has this sort of, it has this sort of, like kind of wild independent spirit, because it tends to be a little bit cheaper up here and it's kind of far away from downtown. So it's not really, it hasn't really like gentrified in the same ways as many other neighborhoods in Chicago have. So it's cheaper to live. So there's lots of like artists and musicians and folks like that who live up here, and actors and so on. So that's why we're up here too.
Yeah, I might have told you this. I'm sure I did. I can't remember. We met a few years ago, and actually you were in my city. You were in Toledo, and we had a chance to talk quite a bit at the time. And now, of course, I don't remember what we talked about and what we didn't talk about. But I may have told you that my uncle lives in Rogers Park and is a artist and photographer, and actually did a online photo series called People of Rogers Park. And I think he feels the same way, right? He is kind of taken by the neighborhood, such as it is, but the people in the neighborhood, and just is really, thinks there are a lot of wonderful, fascinating people there. So you're not the only person I've heard that from.
Totally agree. And yes, I'm a fan of your uncle's work. I used to follow that on social media when he was working on that. And just as an example, like last August, we had a bona fide tornado. Like, I don't know what the tornado's numbers are, but this is like a 0.5, like pretty low strength tornado, but a tornado hit Rogers Park. And it took out a lot of trees, damaged lots of cars. And like, as soon as the tornado went through, people were out in the street pulling sticks, chopping trees up to get them out of the road. Eventually local artists like made up like coffee mugs and t-shirts with like "I survived the Rogers Park tornado of 2020," and then donated the proceeds from that to charity to replant the trees and grow the trees back that all fell down. It's just that kind of vibe, it's just, I think it's really fantastic.
Yeah. Your love for Chicago clearly bleeds into your music because you use a lot of lyrics by Chicago poets and about the city. Was that purposeful? Were you looking for things that were specifically about Chicago because you love the city, or did you know the poetry because of where you are, or how? I mean, what was the thing that led you to that?
Yeah. So I think definitely many artists could probably say that they react to the things that are happening around them and the things that are happening in their lives. So, I've written little pieces about the birth of my baby, and we're both relatively new fathers, and I know that you understand that. And I think especially like when I first moved to Chicago and was learning about the history of this city, and learning about the history of the arts in this city, I definitely like super fell in love with living here in general, and also the art that it has produced. So Carl, it's difficult for me not to like be super into Carl Sandburg, A, because his poetry is phenomenal, and B, he's a fellow Midwestern boy who moved to the big city and had a good time in the city and did art about it, which is kind of what I did too. So I've said a lot of Carl Sandburg in my time, for sure.
Yeah. Let's go backwards. Backwards. I know where you're from now because we've talked about it. But tell us in a concise or repeated way, I don't know, when and where were you born?
Sure. I was actually born in Morris, Illinois, in my hometown in 1985.
What are your parents' names?
My parents are Tim and Linda.
And what do Tim and Linda do, or what did they do when you were growing up?
So my dad, Tim, still lives in Morris. He was born and raised in Morris, and he's an attorney. And my mom is from a small town, an even smaller town called Gibson City, Illinois, which is a ways to the south, which maybe you have heard of as well. Yeah. There you go. And she lives in Orlando now. She's retired now, but she was a school teacher, and she worked for my dad as a secretary.
Nice. Yeah, I grew up in Champaign, Illinois, and
Okay, yeah.
played my baseball tournaments, out of town tournaments, many a time in Gibson City. So yeah, I'm
That's
familiar.
crazy. I didn't
Yeah.
remember that. That's
Oh
really
yeah.
interesting. Again, it's always worth mentioning like little, random small cities because you never know when somebody's like, there you go, you get that
Yeah,
connection.
for sure. And so a teacher and a lawyer, were they musical? I mean, did they play instruments, sing? Were they into music when you were growing up?
Yeah, that's that's an interesting question, and I've been thinking about it because I've heard you ask that question on a couple other podcast episodes,
Yeah.
and I was thinking back to earlier in my life about what they listened to, and honestly, it's a weird thing. I don't really remember them putting on music a lot. We put okay. Around holiday times, we'd listen to Bing Crosby Christmas albums.
Yeah.
Good stuff. I'm a big fan of that. Bing is great. But I don't really remember, they didn't really listen to music for fun that much. But at the same time, I do feel like I kind of had a sort of upbringing because my mom was actually a pretty good piano player.
Huh.
She had not taken, she didn't go to college for it. She took lessons as a girl, I think maybe until high school, but she just played for fun and just kept it up her whole life. And she was pretty good at sight reading. And when I was first composing, I would put stuff in front of her, and she would suffer through it and do a pretty good job, despite the fact that my notation was not super great at that time.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of like, it wasn't like we were going to. Some people have these stories, their parents took them to concerts and stuff like that, and they listened to the latest album or whatever in the car. I didn't really have that experience, but it was a musical household in a different way because my mom was playing piano all the time.
Yeah. So what I mean, what got you into music in a serious way? I mean, not that Morris isn't the hotbed of progressive classical music, but what I mean, where was it that you kind of picked up an interest in music and in composing?
Well, I took piano lessons when I was, I don't know, let's just say second grade, relatively young, for like a couple years because my sister was doing it, and at the time, I guess I wanted to do everything that she was doing, but it didn't take, so I quit after a couple of years. And then in like eighth grade ish, something like that, I was like, I'm going to high school now. I want to be cool. How about I start playing guitar? And
Okay.
so I
Yeah.
asked my parents for a guitar, and I was just messing around on guitar. And then I realized, guitar is fine, but when I listen to music, I really enjoy um, listening to the bass parts.
Yeah.
I really key in on the bass. So I asked my parents for an electric bass, and that stuck. I played electric bass all through high school, but like you said, it wasn't necessarily like a hotbed of like bands and so forth. There were some bands in town, but I just didn't really know those guys. So if I wanted to play music, it was just like me in my basement playing like the bass parts to stuff. Well, that got boring. So I kind of fell back on whatever like music theory knowledge I had learned, you know, um, first learning how to play piano, and started writing little ditties for myself on electric bass, and then
Hmm.
the rest is history.
So did you play in organized music in high school?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't in
Huh.
band class or anything like that. I just was learning bass on my own. I took probably a few lessons, but not too
Yeah.
many, from like a local guy who did bass and guitar lessons. But yeah, no, I wasn't in band. I wasn't in
Wow.
choir or anything like
And
that.
so in those early days of learning bass, what were you learning? I mean, who were you like jamming to and aspiring to be or learning to play like?
Well, remember, freshman sophomore year of high school is typically a moody time.
Yeah, sure.
Uh, so like when I was first like getting into music at that age, and remember I wanted to like fit in and make friends, and I was listening to what the people I thought were cool were listening to. So it was like Corn, It was like Limp Bizkit. It was like new metal type stuff.
Yeah.
Deftones. I listened to the Deftones again. They're pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
The Deftones stands up. Not everything stands up, but I enjoy the Deftones still. And then that's just sort of like when I was getting a little bit more interested in like writing my own little tunes on electric bass. The sort of exploration started to spread out a little bit more over different styles of music, and eventually I wrote like little piano pieces for my mom. So I was like, well, maybe I should listen to a little bit of classical music or look at the piano books that she has and see what I can learn from that and that sort of a thing. So kind of like it started out with like, you know, kind of like embarrassing emo Eric, and then spread out to like a bunch of other genres.
And I was going to ask you another question, but then I was thinking about all the bands that might be on that playlist, like what other groups could be in this like new metal. Were you a Papa Roach fan?
For some reason, Papa Roach didn't. Yeah, they didn't really. I think I got rid of all my CDs. I don't think I saved any of them. I'd have to look up like who was like, you know, new metal-y and popular around then. Tool. Listen to Tool.
Sure, yeah. Zebrahead. Do you know Zebrahead?
Nope.
Okay, let me tell you. Zebrahead was like a rap rock band, but like with a very like Southern California kind of vibe. And my favorite, I was really into Zebrahead. My favorite Zebrahead story, we went to see them in concert in Las Vegas, and opening act had played, and then we're like standing around waiting for the band to show up. And it's been 30 or 40 minutes, something like that, in between sets, and people are starting to get antsy. And they finally show up, and they bring out these giant bags from Burger King and started throwing Whoppers into the crowd. And so I caught a Whopper and I ate it, and I was very happy. Did not mind the wait at all.
That's good.
My Zebrahead story. Yeah. So you start writing a little bit in high school. You're not really in any sort of organized music. You're playing bass. Do you go to college for music?
Yeah, based on the strength of the little compositions that I had written, both for electric bass for myself and the little piano things that I wrote for my mom, that was enough to get me into Illinois Wesleyan University.
Nice.
And I was a pretty okay electric player for playing on my own. Like I could do some advanced tapping-y sort of techniques and stuff like that. I think one of the things I auditioned on was wait, no, that's really funny now that I'm thinking of it. I did a tapping arrangement, you know, where you bring both hands up onto the fingerboard.
Yeah.
I did a tapping arrangement of I Have a Castle on a Cloud from Les Mis.
Wait, didn't you say you were trying to play bass because you wanted to be cool? What?
All right. So this was sort of the tail end of the real emo stage. And I was like, this is the tiny child singing sadly. This is like peak emo here. Like they're going to take me so seriously, man. Oh geez. To my credit though, I did play a Bach as well. I did play a Bach prelude on electric bass as well. And they let me in. They let me in somehow.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I guess you don't think often about people going on to major in music who haven't done a lot of music formally in high school. So not to take away from the, you know, you studying on your own and you know, having your mom be able to play some arrangements and stuff. Certainly that's formal in its own right. But I find that really interesting that you kind of had the gusto for majoring in music without having kind of done it as a class, you know?
Yeah. In retrospect, I'm like, should I have done it like that? But I mean, oddly enough, I feel like that kind of path is maybe more common than you think. Sure. I feel like there's a number of young kids out there that are just doing, especially, I imagine it has to be tenfold now with like the advent of like YouTube. And, you know, this is a time where where, you know, there weren't just tutorials and these folks on YouTube like teaching all this really cool advanced stuff. It was just like me and a couple books that I found.
Yeah.
So I imagine these days there's probably way more kids that have this sort of like interesting blend of like, I'm into guitar, but I'm also into composition. So I'm learning a little bit more about classical music, but I also like, you know, just this kind of interesting mix of stuff, because we've got all of these influences these days that we grow up with, from like popular music to like, you know, there's just so much stuff to listen to and enjoy and explore out there. It kind of makes sense that, you know, many young composers are going to be interested in all sorts of things, not just on like I was an orchestra in high school and then I went to music school kind of a track. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just feel like among composers, especially, it's a more common story than you'd think, that folks were doing all sorts of things, ranging from classical to rock to punk rock to whatever, and go on to music school for sure.
Yeah. So we know about your early pop, well, for lack of a better word, influences. Who were some of the first kind of classical composers? I mean, who is it in that kind of genre of music that got you excited and maybe made you think of that a little bit more?
I was really into Gershwin, but not George Gershwin, not like all of his music. The stuff that I really keyed into as being, this is so cool, is he had a set of three piano preludes. I thought those were so cool. I thought that was the coolest stuff ever. And that sort of, you know, my very, very early pieces where I can find them still are very Gershwin-esque, you know, lots of flat sevenths and lots of bluesy sounding stuff. And then after that, gosh, I'm trying to think of, let's just stick with George Gershwin for now, because I'm sure there's some other composers out there that you know, that I listened to that I thought were just the bee's knees, but that's the one that really like sticks out as like, you know, this is kind of what I want to copy to start off with.
Yeah. Cool.
So I went from Korn to Gershwin-esque. I don't know.
Yeah. No, hey, I hear you. Well, I want to eventually get to start talking about some of your music, but I'm curious. You mentioned that you're a relatively new father. Do you want to tell, you don't have to, but do you want to tell people your son's name?
Sure. His name is August Angelo.
Awesome. And you mentioned to me before we started recording that he is 4 months old today.
Yep. Happy birthday, Augie.
Yeah. My son just turned 1 a week ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And so now we're getting, of course, like all the like photo memories, right? This day a year ago, and looking back, and you can't believe how small he was. And it just, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But wonderful. And I was so happy when I found out that you were going to have a baby, and that's super cool. Is it everything you imagined it would be and more? You know, how are things going?
After the first 6 weeks, everything has been going great. You know, as we talked a second ago, he's sleeping through the night. He goos and gurgles. He goos and gurgles at us and smiles and is super cute all the time. Yeah. The first, not prepared. Like, you know, I went to all these classes and they're like, you're not going to sleep a lot. It's going to be really hard. And it just like went in one ear and out the other or something. I was just like, I'll be fine. Yeah. And then the first 6 weeks, I'm like, oh, this is the real deal. I have a whole, you know, a human life on my hands. But no, things, you know, since then, we're kind of like, you know, he's in a groove. We know more of, specifically me. I know more of what I'm doing now. Stuff has been fine this whole time, obviously. But we're really settled into a groove, and we're actually having a good time now, I think.
That's awesome.
How about you?
And so, well, I mean, things are great. My baby does not sleep through the night.
Right.
He does not sleep. He's getting to be a better napper, but he, you know, I sometimes miss when he was really little and think about, I don't know, does Augie, do you have fans or ceiling fans? Is he, my son would just stare at ceiling fans for hours. And I thought, oh, that's so sweet. But he is now developing such a personality And that's super exciting, right? Like it's not just kind of like smiley baby stuff. It's like him, like a unique individual personality. And it's so fun kind of watching that develop. So I don't need sleep. It's fine.
You'll get there.
But
You'll get some eventually.
the reason I brought that up was because I was going to ask if there is music that you're sharing with your son, either things that you're playing or things that you're singing to him. Is there a soundtrack for your son's life right now?
Um, sort of. It's partly serious, partly embarrassing. So when we're in the nursery, we've got a little radio in the nursery, and we put on the local classical radio station, WFMT 98.7 FM. When we're doing feedings and stuff like that, I turn on the radio station and we listen to a little bit of classical music, or maybe the pledge drive if it's pledge drive time. So that's the serious answer. The goofy answer is we have this little toy that it's this little monkey that hangs over this mobile thing on the floor, and it plays a music box version of "You Are My Sunshine." Super cute, right? Well, me being the composer and getting sick of hearing "You Are My Sunshine" all the time, for a while there, I was trying to sing it to him, but in different modes. So I'd sing "You Are My Sunshine" in the Dorian mode, which is in my opinion my favorite. "You Are My Sunshine" in the Lydian mode is pretty good. I had trouble trying to sing it in Phrygian because I'm not a singer per se, so I just got a little bit off from the Phrygian mode. It's exactly the same in Mixolydian, so let's just not. We don't have to go there.
You said it's your favorite in Dorian mode. Is that because it's your favorite version of "You Are My Sunshine," or is because Dorian is your favorite mode?
I think. Oh my God. Okay, so I think that it's more effective if you do it in Dorian mode, and I won't sing it because the "You Make Me Happy," so that becomes an augmented fourth, which I think really hits a little bit more on that really important word of happy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know all the lyrics to "You Are My Sunshine." I don't have them memorized, but I know that basically all of the other verses besides the one that we all know are like desperately sad. So I feel on two levels, the prosody works better with like the augmented fourth there, I think. And then also just the general like more morose feel of the Dorian mode fits all of the lyrics better than the traditional like major scale would.
It does not surprise me that you've given that a lot of thought.
I'm sorry, Augie. I'm sorry, Steph.
No, that's great. I didn't know that's where we were going to end up when I started asking about your son, but I'm not surprised. Let's talk about some of your music, and let's talk specifically about your choral music. And I'll ask this question, and you can answer it either with what's available on your website or something that predates that. But can you tell us about your kind of first choral composition?
Pardon me. Yeah. So the very, very first one that I ever did was called Four Settings of a Text. It is cute and funny and was a good experiment. I asked a friend of mine in college, this was like senior year in college, asked a friend of mine to write a poem. And he wrote this short acrostic poem that on the face of it was very sort of morose and sad, but was actually about cows and milk. Like the first four lines were like MILK or something like that.
Yeah.
But the imagery that he used was very kind of like it was really a brilliant poem. I should look that up again. It was very sort of Renaissance-y, but also bovine. And on the face of it, it looked very serious, but in fact was not. So I set it four different ways. The first three ways were rather, serious, responding more in a Renaissance way, kind of closely sticking to the meaning of the text. And then the fourth one was, here's the joke, we're actually spelling out the word milk and it's all about cows, sort of a thing. So that was senior year. A really good friend of mine by the name of Ben Kurtman did this thing where he we had this month called May term, where you take an extra or go travel or something like that, and he did this thing that he would arrange on his own called May term choir. And he was like, "Hey, composer pals, do you guys want to write a choir piece?" And I hadn't done it before, and I was like, "Well, sure, we'll give it a try."
Yeah. Nice.
That one's not publicly available. That one's
Yeah.
it's fun, but it's definitely like kind of let's call it juvenilia.
Yeah, I of course, again, I'm sure we talked about this. Forgot that you were friends with Ben, and I don't know Ben socially really, but he wrote a song for my group, Whatever Never Amen.
Oh, cool.
This was in 2013, I think. We did a Twitter commission project, so we kind of put out a call for scores and asked people to write either using tweets or things inspired by Twitter, and he submitted a score, and we gave that a performance. And so yeah, Ben, there you go.
That's really great.
Made his way into the podcast. Tell me about the first choral piece, or the earliest choral piece on your website that is available to people. I know what it is if you've forgotten what the first thing.
Yes, please remind me. I was about to click off and go look at my website.
I believe that the earliest written work for choir available on your website is On the Breakwater.
Okay. Yeah, so there was that was a commission. I'd written one piece before that was sort of like again, it wasn't like kind of in my mature style. I wrote another one that was sort of like this quasi Rachmaninoff-y Russian sounding prayer. It was a Marian prayer, and off the top of my head, I cannot remember the name of it. It was a fine choral piece, but it just doesn't feel very doesn't feel like me.
Yeah.
So On the Breakwater was a commission from the same group, and they this was going to be a very Chicago-y piece. On the Breakwater is a Carl Sandburg poem, and just the poem made me think of my neighborhood. It made me think of Rogers Park up here on the lake, and this very specific spot that my wife and I love to walk to and spend time on. There's this breakwater jutting out into the lake with a lighthouse on the end of it, and there's actually a little like a dune preserve area that they have roped off, where they have native like dune grasses and that sort of thing, that they try and take care of this area. So it's a really magical spot, because if you sit in the right spot, the city behind you is cut off, because there's this little dune area, and if you sit in the right spot, you can either look out and see nothing but lake, or you get an absolutely gorgeous view of downtown 10 miles away to the south. So when I was asked to write this piece, I was reading a bunch of Carl Sandburg poetry, like I do, and I just loved this poem, because I was like, gosh, this is Chicago and my neighborhood for me. Like, I have this spot that is just for me and Steph, and we sit there, and the poetry itself, the imagery of the poetry is just like exactly what we would do. We would just sit in silence and enjoy, the night air on a summer, and look out over the lake or look out over the city. So yeah, that's where that came from. Again, sort of like hyper local, like this is where I am at this moment, and this is what is affecting me, and this is what's important to me.
Yeah. Can you tell us who the group was that commissioned that piece?
Yes, that was the Wicker Park Choral Singers.
And you have a pretty good relationship with that group, because that's not the only thing that you've done with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how did that relationship come about?
Well, I was friends with lots of them in college. Started out as kind of like an Illinois Wesleyan University like alumni group ish, but it was very ably led for many years by my good buddy Mark Tomasino, who founded the choir. He didn't have a conducting degree. He was just he wanted to give it a try, and he wanted to found a group, and he wanted to sing, and he wanted to conduct. And over the course of 10 years or more, he really created this really fantastic group that really so it's called Wicker Park Choral Singers, because that's a neighborhood in Chicago where he happened to live at the time that he founded the group. But it really became like a citywide ensemble with folks from all over, and they perform all over, including up in Rogers Park, and it really included a lot of people of very high caliber, but also a very good character. It was very much like a community. It's a lot of folks who are really good friends with each other and would do anything for each other. And then also would sing like some pretty kick-ass choir concerts too.
Yeah.
The group is sort of in hiatus right now for understandable reasons, but
Sure.
I happen to know the director, and my wife actually sang with them for a while too.
Yeah. When you are writing pieces for them, because again, I know you've done several pieces that they've performed for you. Um, are you involved at all in the rehearsal process, or do you, write the score, hand it to them, and then say, I'll see you at the premiere?
It's despite the fact that I have like a close relationship with like many of the folks in the choir, it's really been treated like pretty typically. Like I will come in and do like a rehearsal. If I have insider information, I guess it's that sometimes I know where a particular concert is gonna be.
Yeah.
Like I have a piece. Oh gosh, what's the name of it? I might have to look. I am seriously gonna have to look at my website. I'm super. My memory is not super great, you guys.
With a 4-month-old at home, you forget everything. It is.
Yeah, it's not like I'm, getting like really great sleep all the time. The Cosmic Process. There's a piece I wrote called The Cosmic Process that I did have the insider knowledge that I knew that was going to be premiered at a really live, boomy, like Byzantine style church. And I knew that there'd be lots of long echoes and decays. So I sort of took that into mind as I was writing the piece. But for the most part, yeah, no, they treated me like any other composer. Like I'd come in and get like a rehearsal, and then the difference is, because my wife is in the choir, maybe I would have to like help take tickets or like, serve punch or something like that after
Sure.
the concert, whatever the case may be.
Uh-huh. And you were talking about some of your early stuff, and then getting into maybe I think you used the word your more mature style, or things that sound like you, right? Is there anything that you can kind of identify or single out as, in your choral works, things that sound like you, or things that are sort of a maybe typical in your approach to the voice or to setting choral music?
Yeah. So I think, if we want to get nerdy about particularly like techniques and stuff like that, I tend to gravitate sort of towards like a more like minimalist style. Let's call it, post minimalist or pseudo minimalist or something like that. I enjoy, if there's a particular bit of music or a chord or a vibe, I like to stress that out. I like to hear a lot of it. So a certain amount of like repetition, kind of gradually unfolding over time. And I think that actually is the case in all of my music, not even my like choir music. I remember in, I don't know, something like 2012, a couple years after grad school, being like, you know what, I just want to write music that makes me feel in a particular way, that gets me excited in a particular way, that is really related to the music that I like to listen to and the stuff that I really key into and enjoy in the music that I listen to. So I was like, well, I should just write a bunch of music that I like, right? And then the rest is history. So that's sort of my approach anyway.
Yeah. Well, for the people that don't know your music and are hopefully hearing bits of it throughout this podcast, and are undoubtedly going to go and scour your website, and check it all out after this. Here, I'll point out some things, and maybe you can thumbs up, thumbs down, or agree like that these are things that you use and you like. You like repetition of notes or small fragments of music, which is sometimes makes learning things a little bit easier. You pass fragments in between voices, and so maybe the same fragment or the same rhythm or something gets repeated in different voice parts quite a bit. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yeah.
I would say that you generally set text more syllabically, and use accents or branching out from certain notes to highlight text stress.
I tend to be, I guess the text that I pick is maybe an important thing to highlight, and I can hold off on talking about that if you were going to ask a question on that later. But definitely, I think it's important to me that uh, the texts that I want to share are really important to me one way or another. They really make me feel. They're really emotive to me, and so I want folks to be able to understand them.
Yeah.
And um, the ideal, I don't know if it necessarily happens all the time, but the ideal would be to get people to enjoy the piece without necessarily having a program like that all the time. It's okay if you want to follow along, that's totally okay. But if we can at least get folks to maybe look up and enjoy the ambiance or enjoy the space occasionally, I think that that's important too.
Yeah. So when you, I have found that when you set um, text and it gets more active rhythmically, you tend to repeat the text. And so that it is, I think, pretty clearly heard, even if there's a lot going on
Yeah,
musically.
yeah, I think so.
Another thing that I've noticed, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that you grow often from small, either a unison or one note that becomes two notes, that becomes maybe a fifth above that, and then kind of grows and builds a lot. Not every piece, but that happens, and sometimes that happens again at the start of a new section, right? So it's
Yeah.
build, and then it starts kind of small again and grows.
Totally. I think that comes from sort of like a quasi minimalist kind of approach, is that, it's there's an audio, Steve Reich or somebody um, had an important principle in their music, which is that they wanted people to hear the process and to be able to
Mm,
understand the process. Oh, I can understand that here's this one voice, then we're adding another voice. Here's another voice, and be able to follow along as the piece is sort of constructed over time. And I think that's really cool. For me, I feel like that's really thrilling to start off with something really, really small and then hear it transformed into something like really, really big over time, and has this sort of logic to it that I find really irresistible.
it's interesting because you've in two quick things sort of said things that are um, not working against each other, but kind of a different approach. So you talked about the text and being, I think, effusive about your passion for the texts that you pick, right? And so the words mean a lot to you, and that you emotionally connect to them. But on the other hand, it sounds like you are maybe a little bit process driven in the way that you write. So maybe you can tell us, go back to the text, because I know you maybe we're going to expand on that a little bit. How
Mhm.
you pick texts, and um, what it is about those texts and those words that kind of rings true for you.
Yeah, totally. So I think that this, I mean, the whole like process versus explicating the text in a listenable way is, I don't know, I feel like I kind of work at cross purposes against myself sometimes. So I know a lot of the repetition that I do is because I would like there to be like an under, so in On the Breakwater there tends to be sort of like this undercurrent where certain voices are kind of like the waves, or there's a melody going over the top, so the waves are sometimes repeating um, an apt word that describes the lake or whatever the case may be. And yeah, I think just my approach of, it's similar to like why I write a particular piece, because I just moved to Chicago and I'm in love with it, or because I'm engaged to my wife, or I'm in love with her, or a bunch of awful shit is happening to the world, and can I please do something with my music in some tiny way. A lot of that stuff is like what is important to me in that moment, and that's how I ended up picking my texts. So as much as I love Carl Sandburg, I've been trying to move away from just setting a lot of Carl Sandburg all the time, which was kind of my MO for a little while.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to really explicitly like explore uh, poets of color that I haven't read before, that maybe weren't taught in school, female poets that weren't taught in school, in some of my pieces that aren't necessarily um, that aren't choral pieces. I've done things like interview people and set the interview to music. and I plan on doing that in some. I've got some irons in the fire for some stuff that I want to do, sort of about the events of the past year that are going to involve talking with people, and if they're okay with it, setting their interviews and their responses and their words to music one way or another.
Cool. We're going to come back to the idea of you interviewing people. But I wanted to ask you about a couple other pieces of yours. And I have just lost the name. I
got my website right here.
Yeah, good. I was re-listening to all of your music today before we started talking, and you have a choir, a piece set for SSA choir, with a title that I'm not going to remember, so I won't even pretend that I do. But you have it in front of you.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so you can tell us the title and then maybe about the piece and the genesis of it.
Sure. So it's called For the Sin of Bossiness. So I have a really great poet friend that I've collaborated with a lot. I think this is the only choral work I've done with her, but I've done a lot of sort of art songy type stuff. And again, we've got irons in the fire. We want to do all sorts of projects together. Her name is Rebecca Morgan Frank. She is like way more accomplished than me. Like she's had poems published in like the New Yorker and stuff like that. Like I don't know why we're friends, but there you go. She's a fantastic poet, and I really enjoy her stuff. And she has a series of poems from, the book is over there. She has a series of poems from her book called Little Monsters Everywhere, and they're sonnets on various sins. And I keyed in on a few of the poems as being very much like female sins. So there's a poem on gossip. There's a poem on, this one is on bossiness. So this is the one that has been set so far. I hope to set the other ones. But so For the Sin of Bossiness puts kind of the speaker in the place of a hive of bees. Where all of these, there's a queen bee and all these other bees sort of commenting on, sort of like a cosmic punishment. Like, if you're bossy, do you get, reduced to the scale of a bee or whatever the case may be? So the piece itself is very, buzzy, lots of close intervals, lots of voices being sort of passed. There's not really sort of like a because it's SSA, it's not like there's like a root of the chord all the time. This is very much a piece where all three parts sort of have a very similar melody being passed back and forth to one another, like a swarm of bees, passing messages back and forth.
Yeah, I love it. I love that.
Oh, great.
Piece.
Thank you.
And I think it is one of your, it's a fairly accessible piece in that I think that a really fine high school SSA ensemble could handle it. Some of your pieces, even say on the Breakwater, is accessible in many ways, but I think is deceptively difficult, and it has some range and tessitura issues that may make it challenging for younger singers, right? High school tenors would probably not want to do that.
Yeah.
But For the Sin of Bossiness is, I think it's a delightful piece. I think it captures the poetry really well. The poetry's phenomenal. And I liked you said it was really buzzy, and I think it does it. It is, the harmonies are close in a way that with the repetition and the rhythm, that buzzy is a great word for it. And I think a fine high school women's chorus could certainly attack that piece and should.
Excellent. Well, ericmalmquist.com, folks.
Yeah.
I really, but no, I like, Brad, I do feel like I have to put this caveat out here that I feel like I'm in like, I partly don't know why I'm on a choral music podcast. Like I'm totally a choral music groupie, but it's like just a part of my output. Like I would love to do more choral music because I love singers and I love writing for choir. And some of my most emotional experiences in going to concerts have been like listening to choirs. But unfortunately, it's just like only part of my my output and not really. I didn't grow up singing in choirs and that sort of a thing. So any sort of comment where you're like, this would be this sort of style or this sort of thing would be challenging or good for a particular level of choir is super helpful to me because I want to keep writing, and if I can write some stuff that appeals to a wider group of ensembles, that would be great.
Well, I think people will like that one, so
Cool.
they should definitely go and check it out. And you mentioned your website, but a lot of your scores are also available for sale at Music Spoke.
Hmm.
And so people, if they go to your website, they may click through. If they hit store and they want to buy something, you've got recordings on your site, and they can also go to Music Spoke and see the score in, I
Hmm.
think, every case of the pieces that are there,
Yep,
and
should
hear
all
the
be there.
music. So they should try and go check that out. I want to ask
Thank
you
you.
about at least one more choral piece, and it is, to my knowledge, not recorded or performed yet, but maybe the latest piece that you're working on, which is sort of a bigger collection of music. Maybe you could tell us about that.
Well, winter songs is something that I picked out 4 poems. Actually, I picked it out many years ago. It was sort of like a, a piece that I always wanted to do, but until, I don't know, for some reason, the past year, I always had commissions and things to work on, so I never quite got around to like writing this piece. Nobody was commissioning me for a specific like winter themed choral work, so I just kind of put it to the side. Well, 2020, 2021 rolls around, and suddenly I've got a lot more time. So this is a piece of 4 um, poems by American female poets on the theme of winter. And I specifically didn't want to pick, I didn't want to write holiday music per se. I didn't want to have anything that was necessarily Christmas themed or religiously themed. So I very specifically selected very secular, weather related winter songs. So that's in 4 movements, and that's about 10 minutes ish. And again, you've been very helpful with your comments. It's meant to be sort of an accessible option for folks who might be interested in some sort of secular winter choir music. It's probably, again, because I didn't grow up singing choir music, we've talked about this, it might be a little bit hard for some high schools, but I think it would certainly be accessible for other groups for sure.
Yeah. Well, look, not everything needs to be accessible to high school students, right? We've talked about that. I think with a couple of the folks on the show, kind of because I ask about accessible music only because I know that there are. I taught high school for 6 years,
Mhm.
and I remember as a high school teacher, you would go to, say, a conference, ACDA conference, and you'd hear some of the best choirs, and you'd just go, "Well, my singers can't do that," and it is a struggle sometimes. Or you'll hear about this great new composer and this great new piece of music, and it's just so far from something that those singers can do. So I always think it's important um, to point out for teachers of younger singers or just less experienced singers that um, there is music that's available to them that is still really good or challenging in a way that they can feel like they've really accomplished something by doing it, and that less experienced or younger choirs don't have to sing quote easy music.
Mhm.
So I try and highlight that when I can because I think that's really important.
I think if I can sort of, again, I'm very much choral adjacent, but from my experience, I feel like young people today, especially if they're into music, like I teach composition lessons at the Youth Symphony Orchestra here, the CYSO, and I've been really impressed with pretty much all of the kids there in terms of their maturity, their discipline, their willingness to learn, their willingness to try things that are new. I was not doing the things that they're doing now at when I was their age. It's really impressive, and I feel like, um, gosh, I feel like some of these kids and some of these ensembles could really benefit and really enjoy um, music that caters to them in maybe a more serious way. And I've listened to every episode of your podcast because I spend many hours a day washing bottles and washing
Sure.
dishes and that sort of thing. So I need something to entertain myself. So I've listened to your podcast and I've enjoyed the folks that have said, "Hey, I have this kind of difficult piece, but on difficult subject matter,
Mhm.
let alone the music itself." And they've had these great experiences exposing these younger singers to a topic that's difficult, and it's caused good discussions, and made them think about the world in a different way. And I think that concept would be super great, because I feel like these kids just really deserve it. They deserve to be taken a little bit more seriously, at least from my exposure to these kids at the CYSO.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of inescapable, isn't it? I mean, in 2021, you're not shielding young people from things very well anymore. I mean, it's impossible, right? And the realities of the world are just such an ever-present thing in young people's everyday lives. I mean, it filters into everything that they do. They're online. It's right in front of them all the time. You can't not have the difficult conversations, and choral music is a great avenue for that, because it's art that you're discussing, right? So the words that you're singing may have some difficult subject matter, or they might have talk about something that somebody could view as having a political bent to it, or having a religious or non-religious bent to it, or whatever. But it's art, right? The piece, the poem. And so you have an ability to discuss it in a way that isn't just kind of the meaning of those words to you as a person, right? I mean, there's something bigger about it when it's set to music and being shared with an audience, I think. I don't know if I'm saying that well, but I think that it's unavoidable. And so it's nice that there are increasingly composers who are talking about some of those things. So you have told us several times that you're choral adjacent, which I say bullshit on, because I think you are a choral composer, and you have some really, really, really lovely things. So don't be choral adjacent, just be choral along with the other things. But you do have quite a bit of music for voice, solo voice. And I don't know if you can maybe talk a little bit about why you like writing music for the solo voice, because again, there's quite a bit of it, and I don't know if it's been opportunity to write for certain people or certain situations, or if it's something that you're just really excited about. So maybe you can tell us about that.
I think, well, partly it's my choice of text. I read a bit of poetry or a text or something that really excites me, and I want to set it. Absolutely. Part of it is also, I was a bass player, and for some reason I found myself really enjoying the company of singers over instrumentalists when I was in school. Not to say that the instrumentalists were bad. I had plenty of, I've got a tuba player and percussionist friends out the wazoo, but I really spent a lot of time hanging out with singers. And I think there's something about maybe, many singers are very sort of confident and extroverted, and I'm a little bit more like introverted. So I was like, ooh, somebody's expressing their opinion very confidently. I'm very interested in that. That's not what I do. My wife's I'm sort of a singer groupie. I just really enjoy working with singers and hanging out with singers. And I think that's just kind of natural. The love of particular texts and studying those to music, and then the love of working with singers just sort of naturally combined into me writing tons and tons of art song all the time.
Do you have a setting, an art song setting that you are particularly proud of, or one that you are particularly excited about at the moment?
Let me just take a tiny little detour to ericmalmquist.com. Gosh, well, I mean, there's a lot that I'm really proud of, honestly. There is a set of songs that I wrote a couple of years ago called Baroque songs. So that's another thing that I do, is I happen to write a lot of music for historically informed practitioners, folks. And I wrote some songs based on sort of Renaissance-y early Baroque poetry for a woman by the name of Josephine Stoppenberg, who is an incredible singer, and she's internationally renowned, and I feel really, really lucky that I got to work with her. So it's for her and for harpsichord and for optional Baroque flute. That was part of a project where I was working with a singer a flutist and a harpsichordist. And that's a piece that I'm really proud of, because it sort of it takes kind of my various tendencies of the things that I'm interested in, like finding interesting poetry, working with historical instruments, working with singers, and kind of brings them all together. And in particular, one of the things that I think is really interesting about that piece and working with historical, we'll call them hipsters, HIP for historical reform, with working with these hipsters, is that it's partly like a different language or a different dialect of the same language. Like, they're such musicians, but it's necessary to give them some freedom, and I think that's really exciting and interesting. So I do things like I've started like leaving off metronome markings, and if you're writing for harpsichord, you can't write any dynamics at all, and sometimes I'll just leave off dynamics completely. I'll leave off a lot of the specifics that I was sort of like trained as a composer to put in. Like, we are often trained to put in lots of details and lots of black ink to kind of prove, like, not to say everybody does this, but to prove like how smart we are. We've got to put in all these septuplets and quintuplets overlapping each other and stuff like that. And that's not really my vibe. I've really enjoyed working with these hipsters because, they can really, from their skills and their background, they can really put themselves into performance, because that's what they have to do. If they're working with this Baroque music that doesn't have like a lot of markings and there's no recordings from that time, they're so good at keying into the really important parts of the score. So when I wrote this particular piece, I wrote sort of like a basic melody for Josephine to sing, and of her own volition, in certain parts, she starts putting in her own Baroque ornamentation on a particular song, or takes way longer on a particular phrase than I was like originally envisioning, and I'm totally okay with that, because I feel like I get better performances if the singers and the instrumentalists are more engaged, if they're having more fun, if they're using, they're not just finale automatons, like MIDI machines or something. They've got all these skills, so let's let them breathe a bit and express themselves. So that's one set of songs that I'm really excited about. That's a couple years old, and of course I'm writing teeny tiny things all the time as well.
Yeah. And some of the solo voice songs I know are up on Music Spoke as well.
Yep.
But people can certainly go to your website and hear more of that stuff. I was just started looking at, I think you have a set of maybe 4 Chicago songs for solo voice.
Yeah.
I didn't imagine that, right?
No, you are correct. I actually have 2 kind of bigger collections of Carl Sandburg. That was definitely my Carl Sandburg phase. Yeah, and I think they're both for mezzo or medium voice is what I identify them as. And the first one is more from my early days in Chicago, where I was just like, wow, a big city. So it kind of has that vibe. And then the second set is definitely more like, once you've been here for a while and you see it's an amazing big city, but there's also poverty and violence and crime and iniquity of every kind. Like, that's more of the second set. And Carl Sandburg wrote about those things were happening in Carl Sandburg's day too, as they are now. So that's sort of the poetry that I keyed in for that.
Yeah, good. Let me ask you some Chicago specific questions. This is going to be our kind of rapid fire, all about Chicago. Do you like an Italian beef sandwich?
I like them dipped. I like them real dipped.
Do you have a favorite in town?
I have to. I'm. This is going to be everybody's answer, but Portillo's is good. Portillo's is just good.
Yeah.
It's a chain. They've got spots all over the place, but you just get a sandwich there. It's not a sandwich. It's basically like a sandwich slurry, like in beef juice. Real good. Only get that every once in a while, though. It's bad for you.
What do you put on your hot dog?
Definitely not ketchup, my man.
There you go.
I hold off on the sport peppers because I can't really do spicy, but otherwise all the fixings. I give the pickle to my wife because she likes pickles, but otherwise it's all the fixings.
So it's a fairly typical Chicago dog. That's
right on.
Favorite pizza in the city?
Okay, so we have so Chicago deep dish gets a lot of flack for supposedly not being pizza, and also people from Chicago not actually eating it. Okay, so people from Chicago don't actually eat deep dish that often because it will kill you if you do. I mean, it's like
Sure.
it's like a bucket of cheese basically. So
Yeah.
I love Chicago deep dish, but obviously we don't eat that all the time because that would be totally bad for you. There's a local pizza shop called JB Alberto's that is, they've been around for 30 years, 40 years, something like that. So good. They've got a pan that is just, and you can go there super late at night and get pizza by the slice, which I can't really do anymore because I'm a dad, but I used to do stuff like that. So JB Alberto's up here in Rogers Park.
Nice. I'll tell you, my favorite Chicago style pizza deep dish is actually in Champaign. But Papa Del's, and anybody who has ever been to Champaign and eaten it, or who lives there, will tell you it's incredible. It is incredible. It's my absolute favorite bite of pizza in the world. The sausage is made in house and is incredible.
Oh, that's the stuff.
One of my favorite Chicago pizzas is Pequod's, because the little burnt cheese around the crust.
Mhm.
And again, people who know. And then there's a place in Seattle that is run by guys who I think they went to Illinois, but they know Papa Del's pizza, and they've kind of combined it with Pequod's. And so it's a place called Windy City Pie in Seattle. And it is kind of a combination of my favorite Chicago city pizza versus favorite Chicago style pizza. So, man, but I'm a sucker for
City pies.
I'm a sucker for pizza, and I love deep dish. Love deep dish.
Well, we've had lots of pizza lately because we're new parents, so we order out a lot.
Totally. We've been getting coupons in the mail. So Marco's Pizza is like now a national chain, but it's actually from Toledo, and it's similar. I don't want to say this because it sounds not good, and it's better than this, but it's similar to your Domino's, Papa John's pizza, national chain pizza, but it's pretty good. They've been, I hope nobody from Marco's hears this and figures this out. They've been sending my wife a coupon for 50% off her order every week. And then she gives me the coupon code and I use it like in the app. And so we're basically getting half price pizza. I'm not saying we order pizza every week, but we order pizza every week. So I hear you on that.
Right on, man. That's good.
Are you a sports fan?
This is the question that I knew was coming up. Not really, unfortunately. But to head off the question there, if I had to pick, I guess it would have to be the Cubs because I definitely grew up as a Cubs fan. And I'm in, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily going to make you pick between the two of them, but I'm glad you chose the right team. I'm also a Cubs fan. So, favorite tourist spot in the city?
So definitely not Navy Pier, definitely not the Taste of Chicago. People don't actually go to there if you're from Chicago, but I would probably have to say the Bean. And the Bean is, for those who aren't in the know, the Bean is an art sculpture that's not actually titled the Bean. It's called the Cloud Gate sculpture, in case I didn't say that correctly. It's in downtown. It's this reflective bean looking thing. And it's just really cool because you go and you take your picture in it and you get an excellent view of the skyline and distorted buildings and stuff like that. It's just it's a really nice bit of public art. And it's also, because it's just sitting there, it's not really like expensive or commercialized. You can just walk up and enjoy it. So yeah, I totally love walking around Grant Park and, going to looking at the Bean and stuff.
Is the Jaume Plenza faces artwork still up?
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought so. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't like the Bean?
Did you frolic in the fountains, Brad?
I mean, how could you not? How could you not? Right?
That's good.
What is your favorite spot in Chicago that isn't a touristy spot but should be?
Oh, geez. Okay. So this is a really tough question to answer because I feel like most Chicagoans that have lived here for a while wouldn't want their favorite spot to become a touristy spot.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, I will say what my favorite spot is, and I will say why. And I don't think it's ever going to become a touristy spot, but up here in Rogers Park, like most of Rogers Park is 10 minutes away from the beach. So there's a beach downtown called North Avenue Beach. It's where all like the high school kids go over the summer, and it's like a mess.
Yeah.
Up here, it's super great because it's just people from the neighborhood. Like nobody knows we're up here. It's this beautiful beach. It's absolutely free. So if you go to certain suburbs, you have to pay $7 to get on the beach or whatever the case may be. So it's absolutely free, and there's just people from the neighborhood. So there'll be Polish grandmas, and there'll be families grilling out, and there'll be kids playing soccer and using garbage bins as the goalposts and stuff like that. We've just got this beautiful beach and park that's absolutely free, and it's just 10 minutes away. And what I should say is it's really awful, and nobody should come up here. And
Eric,
don't visit, please.
I love that you're being optimistic about the number of people that are listening to this podcast right now. I don't think you have to worry that by you saying that there's going to be an onslaught of people.
Well, you never know.
Nothing would make me happier. I just don't think that that's probably the case. You don't
never
have anything
know.
to worry about.
Someday, people are going to listen to this. It's going to get popular, and they're going to be like, "I'm going to listen from episode 1. Oh, there's this cool beach in Rogers Park. I should visit."
You're probably right. You're probably right. What music are you listening to these days? Are you any commercial music you're really into right now, or?
A great question, for which I'm also prepared because I've listened to 3 other episodes of your podcast so far. In the past, when I get asked questions like this, like what is your favorite composer that you've heard recently and stuff like that, I have weird listening habits, in that I tend to not really listen to music for fun a lot. I kind of have these 2 modes where, I'll put on like lo-fi hip hop on YouTube just so I can concentrate on something that I'm working on.
Sure.
Or it's research for a piece. So both on YouTube, I will just look up somebody will have an ancient harpsichord score that I can look at, which is great, and then hear a recording. And then of course there's endless lo-fi, hip hop things to listen to as well. And I just have a really difficult time, like just exploring new music for fun, because sometimes it can feel like a chore. Like I have to know this thing, I have to glean the musical insights from it. But I also have this kind of weird listening habit where I tend not to. I've got little like bits of songs or like individual songs from albums that I like, but not necessarily whole albums or artists or anything like that I even follow.
Yeah.
So like there's a recent Billie Eilish song, and I won't look up the title, but like it's really like low key, and the music video is like her driving a car into the ocean with her brother or something like that. And just, I don't know, the song is really cool. I just think it's a super cool song. It's very low key. I'm not necessarily a fan of her singing style, but I just think it's just it's a well produced, it's a neat song, and it gives me the feels, which
Nice.
I think is great. Have I listened to any other Billie Eilish? No. That was just like a random like YouTube, like I'll listen to this and see what this is like, and I enjoyed it. So so that's my. So no, I guess there isn't really like an artist that I'm like like following recently is the full answer.
It's funny. I listen to a lot of music, but I don't have as much time anymore to like stay on like this is the new thing, right? This is all the new music that's out. And I used to I used to sit, and on Fridays it'd be like what new albums are out, and I would just listen to as much as I could, because I like discovering new people. That's not true anymore, so I will now. I'm getting old, and I hear things way after they've become super popular, and so I had heard people talking. Do you know the song "Driver's License"?
No.
Okay, it's a whole thing. And I'd heard people talking about it, and I thought, I'm going to hate this song. And then I finally heard it, and I was like, that's kind of a good song. Like, I don't hate this at all. And then like 2 days later, there was a skit on Saturday Night Live not making fun of that song, but using that song and kind of making fun of people like me for liking that song.
Mm.
And so now if I hear the song, all I can think of is the SNL skit. And so it effectively ruined any
It's ruined
chance of me
forever.
liking the song. Anybody who knows the song or has seen the SNL skit will know exactly what I'm talking about.
I just did the thing like that I do with my kids, but I teach at CYSO. Like when they say like, "Oh, I'm really into this," I'm like, "Yeah, sure," and I like Google it real quick so I can listen to
Sure.
it later. So I'll put that on later.
Yeah, I'm not embarrassed to admit that I think it's a catchy song. Yeah. TV. Do you watch TV?
Yes, yeah.
Are
We
you
watched probably.
binging like everyone else? Is there something you've been really excited to watch during the pandemic?
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like we watched most all the TV. At one point, I was like, we were having difficulty finding something interesting to watch, and I was like, did we finish Netflix? Are we done
Yeah,
with
right.
Netflix? I can't really find. Wow, there's an end to Netflix. What I've been watching a lot of recently is like true crime documentaries on
Yeah.
Netflix, or documentaries in general. So my wife has done a lot of like event planning stuff in her past career. So we watched the Fire Festival documentary on Netflix, which is this huge train wreck of a festival where basically all the things you aren't supposed to happen like happen to this festival. And it's just like watching, for her, it's like watching a car crash. Like she's like, "Oh,
Yeah,
I
sure.
can't believe that they didn't secure insurance," and or whatever the case may be. And then we're also, I guess, it's sort of like a, oh my God, we need to turn our brains off and watch something cheerful. We've been watching Schitt's Creek for the second time, start to finish again. Yeah, it's a good show.
It's just so good. That was another one that I didn't know about until people knew about it. Right, I was late to the party, but and I watched an episode or two and was like, maybe I could be into this. And then by the end of it, you're like, I need more of this immediately. Like it just it's impossible to not feel good when you're watching that.
Yeah, totally agreed.
Yeah. Eric, I could talk to you forever. I will tell you, sometimes you meet people and that's what like you will acknowledge that you've met them. And sometimes I think you meet people and you're like, I think we're friends now.
I mean, look at our beer choice.
And we've only, I think, actually seen each other in person a couple times. You were out in Toledo for a performance. We did some of your work, and then we connected in Chicago. I think there was a ACDA conference, and you came out to the bar, and we talked for a little while. But I haven't spent much time with you. But I kind of knew when we met, or I did. Maybe it was only me. When we met, I kind of had a feeling that we were maybe kindred spirits in a way, and that we would be friends. So I am so happy that we got a chance to talk in this format. Really quickly before we finish, because I know that you're potentially have upcoming projects that you're excited about and I'm excited about. You are thinking about starting your own podcast, or are planning to start your own podcast. I know, because your website says podcasts.
Right, it's got that on there. Well, the inspiration came from so the podcast is going to be called Doing the Thing. And I just want to talk to folks such as yourself that are creative people about how you do the thing, and more importantly, why you do it.
Sure.
It isn't going to be necessarily music specific, because the inspiration for it was I was talking with my barber at one point a couple of months about how he gets through his day. He's got to talk to a lot of people. Like, how do you even deal with that kind of a thing? And his strategy was, well, I just ask people about what they do, and how does that work? And just sort of like ask questions and get the people talking about what they want to do, much like this. And I just thought that was a really neat idea, because that's also kind of how I deal with. I mentioned earlier that I'm kind of introverted, and that tends to be how I deal with, like, if I'm feeling nervous, I just really like to ask people questions about what they do, and oftentimes it's not just to get over me being nervous. It's because I'm genuinely interested in why, say, Brad chose choral conducting as a career choice instead of singing or anything else that he might have been interested in doing. Or I'll have my barber on at some point, or whatever the case may be. So Yeah, it's for now, it's going to be a passion project. So if you head over to my website and click on that big old podcast link, eventually there will be a thing there. I'm recording my first episode next week, I hope. And
Nice.
Dr. Brad Pearson will be a guest at some point in the future. And we'll hopefully get a chat with him as well.
Well, I hope so. I'm honored that you would think of me. I do hope that people will head over to your website and listen to some music, because there's some gorgeous stuff on there. We talked mostly about choral music, but as you have mentioned, it is not all choral music, and lots of good stuff. They can find recordings there. They can find some scores to peruse at musicspoke.com, and hopefully they will go and do that, and then they'll be friends with you too.
Yay. It's all about, I feel like, as I was thinking of like answers to random questions that Brad might ask me, I realized like just an important part of who I am as a musician and as a person is just trying to seek out like people, like seek out my tribe. And
Yeah.
whether that's a harpsichordist or whether that's you, Brad, or a singer, whatever the case may be, there's just so many interesting people out there, and I want to meet more of them and bring more people into my tribe for sure.
Very cool, man. Well, I have the problem with drinking an IPA is I really had to nurse this, because I am almost done. When I had a 14% stout, it was a little bit easier to make it last for a full show. So, but I've got a little bit left. You got a little bit left here? Good. No, you don't. Well, I'll
Nope.
say cheers. You can pretend you've got some left. And
I got a smidge there. Yeah.
There you go. Cheers. Thanks
Cheers.
again, man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for episode 5 of the Composer Happy Hour, presented by Whatever and Ever Amen. Thank you to my guest, Eric Malmquist, for spending some time with us. When you're done here, stop by Eric's website and check out some of his music. And also, please keep an ear to the ground for his new podcast, coming soon to all your favorite streaming services. I have no doubt that it will be filled with some great conversation with amazing people. I'm also sure that Eric would agree. If you are ever in Chicago, visit some of the neighborhoods that aren't popular tourist destinations, like Rogers Park. Neighborhoods are what makes Chicago great. They have a unique feel, a vibe about them, a great ability to reflect the character of the people who live there. And that's the real Chicago. As always, I want to remind you to subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you listen, so that you never miss an episode. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a 5-star rating and help more people to find our show. Finally, if you really like what you hear, visit us at buymeacoffee.com/whateverchoir and buy us a beer. These small contributions add up and help support future projects by Whatever and Ever Amen. Our guest next time is Jake Runestad, and we look forward to sharing another drink with you then. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers.